Hello, and welcome to Fierce Conversations with Toby, the show where we talk about the hard things. I'm Toby Dorr. In today's episode, we'll embrace the art of living and loving through letting go. Our guest today is Kathryn Boxill, a living out loud enthusiast, foodie, Howard University bison, radio producer, and host. Kathryn encourages us all to live our soulful purpose with abundance of love, grace, courage, and fun. Hi, Kathryn. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
It's such a delight always to see your happy face. And we have our matching T-shirts, but we'll talk more about that here
Yes,
shortly.
we came prepared. We knew the assignment.
We did, didn't we? We were right on top of it. So I like to ask all my guests a question that kind of gives us a peek into who they are. What's your favorite color, and what does that say about you?
My favorite color. So my favorite color initially was purple, and then orange came into the fold for similar reasons, but different reasons. But I'll focus on the purple since that was the first one. And that was because purple is just this rich, vibrant, beautiful color. And whenever I looked at it, it just made me feel good. And so then years passed by, and I actually looked up like what the meaning of purple is. And they had royalty and nobility and luxury. And then it also mentioned it's the color of it. People who love it are intuitive and enjoy, being on the spiritual path. And so after reading that, I was like, okay, well, it's clear why I was drawn to the color purple, because all of those things, I believe, are what makes up me to a degree.
I think you're right. And purple is a pretty powerful color. And surprisingly, I think it's been the most favorite of all my guests so far.
Yeah.
Which I found pretty surprising. Most people pick blue or, some common color. But purple, I think, is bold and out there. And I love it.
And people who love purple usually. Like
Yes.
They really incorporate the purple. They have purple this, purple that, purple,
That's so true. Yeah, they surround themselves with purple. And there's so many shades. You can go from something really soft and relaxing to something just that makes you get up and move.
Exactly.
Yes, I love that. I love that. So can you tell us about a crossroads in your life that pushed you in a different direction?
That's a good question. I would have to say the crossroads for me was making the decision to go to Howard University. I had got my acceptance letter at the very last hour. So much so I thought I was going somewhere else. I was all prepared to go somewhere else. And then I got the acceptance letter, and it was a no-brainer, and I had to immediately pivot. And why it's such a major crossroads for me is because even right now, I'm sure I wouldn't be sitting here with you, Toby, doing this interview if I hadn't gone to Howard. I would have went on some other different path. And it's just been a major influence in my life.
It is an important part of your life. And I know that you're still involved in the Alumni Association pretty heavily. And I love hearing all the Howard stories.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm involved with the alumni band organization. I'm the coordinator and have been for some years. I was in the marching band at Howard, and I played the alto saxophone. And so, with that also, as a result of being in the band, I pledged an organization called Tau Beta Sigma National Honorary Band Sorority. So that further solidified my participation and love of band, of music, musicianship, and of sisterhood and brotherhood.
I love that, and I think sisterhood and brotherhoods are so important. And that's actually leads into my next question, because you and I met 2 years ago. We were randomly placed into an author group at a seminar that we went to. And there were 6 of us in that group, and we were all working on memoirs. And we really created this really deep, meaningful, supportive relationship. In fact, This past October, we all went to stay in a cottage in Maine on the coast, on the beach. And it's the first time I had met you because luckily I'd moved to DC and we were close enough to get together, but none of the rest of us had ever met in person. And we'd been meeting for a couple hours a week, every week for 2 years. So, how important is it to have that supportive network in your life?
It's extremely important. I think, life is all about community, and
Mhm.
all about engaging with people and being able to bring to the space your individual way of moving, being, your wisdom, personality. And so I think it's very important. And I've really enjoyed the camaraderie and connection that we've been able to
Mhm.
establish.
I have too, and, I think the most beautiful thing, and I found this in prison as well. It's the only other place in my life I found it, but when you're having a bad day or when you're in a slump and you just need that extra little push, you can get it. You can get lifted up by the women in that group, and I just think it's
Absolutely.
such a beautiful thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So luckily for you and I, we're less than an hour's drive away from each other now. And you had this brilliant idea about a year ago that we should get together once a month and have a working session, which is, we talk, but we just sit there and work on our own things. And I think that having a working partner really helps hold you accountable. So, how has that affected your productivity?
Oh, I mean, it's been a blessing. It's been a blessing, especially for me. And my situation that I've been going through in terms of losing caregiving for my dad, and then
Mhm.
losing my dad, and then shortly losing my mom. And so, with life, you want to keep lifing in the midst of
Yes,
in the midst
yes.
of all that's going on.
Mhm.
And oftentimes you need that support group or that accountability partner to kind of lift you up and be there for you. So us getting together to have our writing dates has been hugely um, important in motivating me, because you're very inspiring and motivating, Toby. So it's just great to be able to get together with you. But it's nice to get out and get in a different space that can also prompt some creativity
Yes.
and movement and have some
Mhm,
fresh ideals, and to be able to do it with someone who's going on a similar journey
mhm.
as well.
Yeah, I think it's and I never know what I'm gonna work on when I go, but one day I just decided to redesign my whole logo and with your input. So, it's just fun how, bouncing ideas off of someone really makes a difference.
Absolutely.
So, you mentioned your dad, which is really what I wanted to get to in this podcast, and your dad, who we all knew as Pop, the man, the myth, the legend. I saw him wearing a t-shirt on your blog with that on his shirt. So
Hmm.
tell us about Pop and what made him a myth and a legend.
Pop is a special man. His first name is Enric Quentin Boxill.
Mhm,
He's from Trinidad, and he had came from Trinidad to Harlem, New York, in the 50s, and with his sisters and mom and everything. Met my mom in Harlem. They married, moved to Brooklyn, and then had me and my brother. And, while my dad was not a perfect man, as many aren't,
mhm,
he was beautiful in the way he was able to engage as a family man in his own way. Um, I can feel his love, his presence, and all that he did in terms of supporting me, being one of my biggest cheerleaders,
mhm,
and me just being inspired by him to want to be better and do better, to make him proud, of course, but then also for me to be a better person and to live
mhm.
my purposeful life.
Yes, I think that's beautiful. And, I know my dad was a huge part of my life too. And he died of cancer. And, that's the same thing that you had to deal with too. And I think that, that word cancer just takes everyone's breath away. But how
Mhm.
did Pop deal with it?
Wow. Honestly, you wouldn't have even known he had it. That's how amazing he was. My dad was 90 years old when he was, diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. Started in the colon, moved
Mhm,
to the lung and liver, I believe.
mhm,
And just by the nature of his personality and who he was and is, I like to always say is still,
mhm,
you wouldn't have known. He laughed a lot, he joked a lot, he sang a lot, he whistled a lot. His wisdom, and being able to just talk about life. I noticed during that time he wanted to talk more about
mhm,
family and life and things
mhm,
that went on, in family, which was very great because it's always nice to get family history. But even in the midst of, I'm sure, the pain that he was going through, he was a, I was a caregiver, so I would say he was a great patient. I hear other people's
Uh-huh,
stories of their caregiving, and mine was easy. He wanted to be very still self-sufficient and
mhm,
independent. And again, this is a 90-year-old man that has stage 4 cancer. And so he really fought it in a very special and beautiful and also engaging way,
mhm,
because not only was he engaging with me, but I would always hear him on the phone. He was always calling people to say hi, whether it was family members or friends. He just really continued to be engaged and continue to be that cheerleader for folks,
mhm.
and just such a spirited warrior, um, he was through that process.
I think that's beautiful. And so your decision actually was to bring Pop from Brooklyn to live with you in your home the last few years of his life. And, helping someone leave this world is not for the faint of heart, but I believe it can be a beautiful thing. Did you find beauty in those years?
Absolutely, absolutely, and it actually wasn't a few years. It was really a year and a couple of months,
Oh, okay.
because he came in September of 2019 and he passed Christmas Day of
Mhm.
2020.
Mhm.
So it was a year and a couple of months. And absolutely it was beauty. It was beauty just based on the things that I just mentioned in terms of how he was. It was beauty for me of being able to be there for him in a way that, if you'd told me a few months before he came that this was going to be our life, I'd have been
Mhm.
like, you're crazy. And then also for me to be caring for a person, in the way that, I had to, was such a gift for me to give back to
Mhm.
him, for all the things and ways that he's been there for me and my family.
Life has an amazing way of coming full circle. I know I was with my mother when she died. We brought her home. She'd been sick. She also had cancer. And um, we brought her home to her home to die. And she said to me, she had a book next to her bed, and she said, "Oh, Toby, I'll never know how my story ends." And I said, "Well, Mom, I could read your book to you." So, we had 10 days during that time. And I read every minute I could. And it was a pretty big book. And I was determined that I was going to finish that book for her. And I would sit and read, and I was just sure she was totally out of it. Her eyes were closed, she was somewhere else. But I kept reading, and I thought, this is kind of silly. I'm reading, and she can't even hear me. And then she'd say something like, "Don't do it." So I knew she was following along the storyline, and it just felt like such a gift. And it made me think about all the times when I was a child and my mother read to me. And I just think it's a beautiful thing that life gives us, that we can, you know, be a caregiver to our parent as they're leaving this world. It just
Yeah.
is such a beautiful gift.
And you said it perfectly when you said a full circle moment, because it definitely is a full circle moment. And it's funny when you just talked about your mom yelling out randomly, "Don't do it," you know.
Mhm.
In that last week of my dad being here, the week before he passed, my dad, like I said, he was doing pretty well. Of course, he had his moments where he would get sick or things would happen, but overall he was good. And then the week before he passed, he just took a turn like that.
Mhm.
And but one day, in the midst of started to have to give him morphine and everything, he
Mhm.
started having these random outbursts. And one day he yelled out, "Is this train vacant?" Now he's laying, he's
Mhm.
laying in the bed, and
Uh-huh.
again, he's not really talking, he's not,
Mhm.
but he randomly yells out, "Is this train vacant?" And I remember looking up at him like, "Oh, so the train thing, that is a thing."
Yes, isn't
Because
it interesting? Mhm.
I'm sure your mom, although you felt, she might not have been listening or whatever, or I'm sure she was, and even in his moments, I'm sure he was.
Yes, I
But
think so.
in those moments, they're beginning to
Mhm.
travel and
Yes.
be called upon. And so the yelling out, "Is this train vacant?" thing, I was like, whoa, this train thing
Mhm.
is really a thing.
Yes, and,
So
I found it to be really reassuring because, my mom said to me, "Your dad and Father Davin are waiting right outside that door for me." And I thought, "I wanna be able to see them. I wish I could see what she's seeing,"
yeah,
because it seemed like a beautiful experience, and I'd never felt from her that she feared it at all. She was joyously moving forward, and I
yeah,
think that's a
absolutely.
beautiful gift that you can give someone at the end of their life.
Yeah, yeah.
So, how has that experience of being a caregiver for your father and helping him leave this world, how has that experience changed your life?
Hmm. Um, I mean, it's changed my life. I think in some ways I'm still trying to figure that out.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because while it's been a couple of years, it's that still hasn't been a long time.
Mhm.
Um, but I think it one way it changed me in a good way is because knowing that I can have the capacity to be there for
Mhm.
someone.
Mhm.
I haven't been married. I don't have children. So, I've led a pretty kind of independent life
Mhm.
of not having to be this person to 24/7 be caring for someone.
Mhm.
And so that was a beautiful experience for me, and to be able to be there for someone in that
Mhm.
way and know that I have it in me
Yeah, that
to
is a
be there
beautiful
for
lesson to
someone
learn.
in
That
that
is
way.
beautiful. Mhm.
So that was a good thing for me, and a good thing to take me out of my regular today again, doing what I do, but being more selfless,
Mhm.
um, and knowing that I can do that, and knowing that I have the strength to do that. Um, and so, that's one way that it definitely impacted me in a positive way.
Mhm.
Now, to what you were saying, caregiving can be a lot. And
Mhm.
so, in other ways that, now I'm still processing, is that caregiving can be very heavy.
Yes, it is heavy. I think it
Um,
definitely is.
Very heavy, could be very traumatizing.
Mhm.
And so, the lasting effects could be PTSD,
Mhm.
just by the nature of, while I said dad made it very easy, but at the same time there are things that were going on that I witnessed and had to deal with.
Mhm.
And then the other part of that is, and I didn't really process this really until later, is that, of course, I knew I was bringing him back to Brooklyn and knowing that I wanted to create for him a quality of life. But at the same time, it's like, wow, I'm doing this with the knowing that this person is going to die
Mhm.
eventually,
Mhm.
and not knowing when that's going to happen or
Mhm.
how that's going to happen. And so in the midst of wanting to create that quality of life and to be there for them, you have in the back of your head that, you know, something's going to happen,
Mhm.
and it could be next week, or
Right.
or it could be 2 years from now. I
Mhm.
don't know, but I'm going to keep pushing. But you know that something's going to happen, and that is definitely a heavy thing to carry.
It is a heavy thing to carry. And I'm not sure we ever get over losing a parent or even another loved one. But I can remember my mom has been gone for almost 9 years now. And the other day I was walking through the kitchen and life was great and I was feeling good. And all of a sudden, this heaviness came and I just kind of slumped. And, my husband noticed. He said, Toby, what's going on? And I said, I miss my mother. I mean,
Mm.
it just hit me like that, and I
Yeah,
just wanted to call her, and
yeah,
knowing you can't do it, and it's so difficult.
yeah,
So
yeah.
so what advice do you have for those who are facing the loss of a parent?
I think the biggest advice, one,
Mhm.
is to continue to explore ways to honor and appreciate who they were and the relationship that you had with them. The other thing is to allow yourself to feel,
Yeah, that's an
allow
important one.
yourself to grieve, allow
Mhm.
yourself to mourn. Oftentimes with life, you know, people, want to keep moving, and I gotta go back to work. I gotta go, I gotta do this, and rightfully so, we have our responsibilities, but in the midst of that, we should be comfortable, to be able to process those feelings and deal with how you're feeling and grieve them, in real time,
Mhm.
because that will only make you a better person down the line, a freer person,
Mhm.
because the goal with all of that is freedom, you know,
Yes.
and so down the line to be free,
Mm.
and not have this heaviness that sometimes people might know that they are carrying. It could be subconscious, but they're carrying it because they haven't dealt with the emotions and feelings of it all. And with that, just making sure you have people who you consider your safe space,
Mhm. That is
to
important.
process, because oftentimes people might not do it because they might not feel safe to do it around people. Get a therapist,
Mhm. Yeah, that's a big
which
help
is
too,
which
right.
is very important. And then again, find those people who you consider your safe space, to that you can cry to, and and go to their place or invite them to your place, and
Mhm.
you can just have those moments where you might just sit and not say anything, but
Mhm.
there's comfort,
Just being there, right.
in that. So yeah,
And there's no deadline to grief. There's no rule book that says you have 1 year to get over it. And,
absolutely.
they have these 7 steps. I don't it just is what it is, and I don't care what step I'm in or if I go out of order.
Yeah.
I haven't even read those 7 steps. I just kind of feel my way through it and listen to what my body's telling me and what I need to do, and sometimes I just need a hug. Or,
Hmm.
sometimes I need to just go and pick up a book that I knew my mom loved and read it and feel like she's there with me. So I
Absolutely.
think it's different for every situation and every person. But the important thing is to be aware that it does take time and you will never be completely over it. But give yourself that time. Don't
Hmm.
feel like you have to stand up tall and be strong and shoulder the world. You need to feel. It's really
Hmm.
important.
Absolutely. And I would say to those, to people who know someone who's potentially grieving, is to keep that in mind.
Mhm.
Because, sometimes people might not know what to say or how to deal with a situation. But, the best gift that you can give to someone who's grieving is that space to grieve
Yes.
and not want to rush them and push them or
Mhm.
question them or potentially shame them even for
Mhm.
still being in a space of grieving, you know even if it's a year or two
Mhm.
or three,
Yeah,
because like
that's
you
right.
said, everyone's journey is a different journey that
It
they're
is
going.
a different journey, and I think, maybe one of the worst things you can say to someone is, "I know how you feel," because you can't everybody's different. You can't possibly know how someone else feels. You can empathize with them, and you
Hmm.
can be there for them in their grief, but you can't tell them how to do it.
Yeah, yeah.
So you held a memorial service for Pop almost a year after he died, and I thought that was such a brilliant idea because we're always in such a rush, you know, get the funeral over with, get it done, 3 days, and move on. And I think, you know, I knew you during the time you were planning this memorial, and I saw the love and the work that went into it and the embracing of everyone who knew him in their lives. And I don't know that you would be ready for that in the first 2 or 3 days after a death. So I love that you took the time. It gave you, you were able to get past the rawness and get past that deer in the headlight look when you're
Hmm.
just so struck by grief and you don't know what to do. And I just thought that was a beautiful way to do it. So what drove that decision?
COVID.
Yeah.
Really, it was COVID that drove that, because of course when he passed, that was December 2020. So we
Mhm,
were heavily in the midst of COVID.
mhm,
I certainly didn't want to plan something to bring people together with the potential of someone getting sick,
mhm.
and then even at that point, when folks were having services, you can maybe only have like 15 people in a room or
Right.
something like that.
Mhm,
And so, you know, I was already very paranoid about COVID because caregiving a person during
mhm.
COVID was like,
Yes, yes.
we, oh my God, it was the worst. So I
Mhm.
was already going through the paranoia of not wanting to bring COVID home to my dad when he was here. So that
Mhm,
was still a continuation. And it was just for safety reasons.
mhm,
And it was a blessing.
mhm.
Um, because for every time then we were like, okay, maybe we'll do it now. Then a new variant would come out. So it was like,
Uh-huh.
okay, I'm going to wait. But it was a blessing. I remember, when my dad first passed and I was talking to one of my brothers and I was telling him I wanted to wait. And he didn't want to wait.
Mhm,
And I just shared with them, I was like, who says we have to do this? I know this is how people have been doing it. Someone dies, you have a service within 1 to 2 weeks,
mhm,
and that's how but who says we have to do it this way? And that
mhm.
was one thing that COVID was kind of a blessing for, because just
Yeah.
various things in our life, it showed us that we didn't have to do it that way. It could be
Mhm,
done differently, and it could still be beautiful. It could be okay. People will be okay. My
mhm,
family was okay. Of course, my
mhm.
dad's sister, every once in a while, she'd be like, so when are we, and I understood where she's coming from.
Mhm.
She's old school, so I
Right,
got it.
right.
But even even she was okay about it. And
Mhm,
the beautiful thing was, we were able to do it exactly how we would want to do it and honor him. And that was the beautiful thing of it
mhm.
all.
I mean, it was a party. It was a party celebration of his life, and
Yeah.
I think that's beautiful. Maybe you started some new trend. I don't know, but I really like that idea. I think it was perfect. So how do you keep Pop as a part of your life?
How do I keep Pop as a part of my life?
How do you
I mean,
keep him involved in your
m-
life?
moments like this. I mean, being
Mhm,
able to talk about him,
mhm,
being able to continue to celebrate him, with my family,
mhm.
and have those moments where we can share and talk about him. When his birthday comes along, it's beautiful to be able um to light a candle, to buy a meal that you know he would have loved,
Yes.
like some oxtail and peas and rice, or curry goat, or
Uh-huh.
something like that.
Yep.
And so that in itself is a beautiful thing to be
I
able to
I think
do
that
and
is
honor.
beautiful. So, what's next for Catherine? Perhaps a book about the man, the myth, the legend?
What's next
Mhm.
is, you know my life is this has been a total transition period for me, because I had the bright ideal to end a relationship with my job of almost 26 years
Mhm.
last year. So I'm in the midst of grieving, and then I make this other huge decision, which then put me in a whole nother grieving space.
Mhm.
And so, right now, which that was a blessing too in itself, because it's allowed me more time and room to grieve, because even in the midst of that, my mother ended up passing
Mhm.
um like a week and a half after I stopped working. So it was perfect time for me
Uh-huh.
to stop working and be able to deal with the multitude of emotions that I've had, going on. And so it's definitely a very transitional life.
Mhm.
Both of my parents have died, so they're not here. So I'm dealing with the emotions of not having my parents, not having a job. So I'm going through a bit of an identity
Mhm.
crisis, so to speak. And so I can't really speak to what is going to be next for me. Of
Mhm.
course, when I went to the writer seminar, I met you and the other group. My intentions at that time was to write a memoir about my dad and
Mhm.
talk about caregiving and be able to support people in their caregiving journey. But what I found, after a while, is that I just wasn't ready to
Right,
to
it does
dive
take
into
time to
that.
be ready. Mhm.
I just wasn't ready to dive into that. And so you know this, but in the midst of that, I gifted someone who went to Howard, who's at Howard now, with a little guide to what I wish I'd known when I had gone to Howard.
Mhm.
And so after that, I had a eureka moment that, oh, I can make this into a little guide. So
Mhm.
I've been working on that. So I plan to publish that and be a official author um, very soon, and then
Mhm.
after that, we'll see where life takes me.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. So your tagline is "Be Do Love." Tell us about that and where did it come from?
Be to Love was born out of being. I love to write.
Mhm.
And being on social media some years ago gave me the opportunity to be able to write and express and share my feelings and emotions. And oftentimes that was inspiring to other people. And so then at one point I would, write about my traveling, I'd love to dine out,
Mhm.
and what I was noticing is people really loved seeing that. It made them feel
Mhm.
good. They loved to see me doing my thing. And so then at one point I was like, okay, well, I'll start to blog.
Mhm.
And so it was like, well, what do I call my blog? So after I went through a number of different thoughts and suggestions, one day, Be Do Love just came
Mhm.
to me. And from that I created the tagline, The Art of Living and Loving. And
Mhm.
really it's just about being able to share my experience of life, whether it's caregiving, grieving, what I'm going through in life that way, or whether I'm traveling or eating out at a really
Mhm.
tasty, good restaurant, but ultimately being able to inspire people to what I call is living outside of their box,
Yeah, I love that.
or living out loud and just,
Mm-hmm.
day to day, we have so much that we're dealing with, people have families, they have work, and sometimes it's just one day to the next, just trying to deal from one thing to other. So if we can find ways to encourage each other to find those moments to appreciate life
Mm-hmm.
and explore life and what that means for that person, because it's not a one size fits all. Somebody might want to write a book, or somebody might want to garden, you know,
Yes, yes.
and that's been
Mm-hmm.
their thing that they've been wanting to do, but just haven't found the time to do. And
Mm-hmm.
so just being able to encourage and inspire people to be able to do those things, but then also to be able to be free again to process life and what that means for
Mm-hmm.
them from a feeling, emotional, healing type of way.
I love that. I love that. And I think be do love just says it all. You can't hardly go wrong with that.
That's right.
So, what's one question you wish I'd asked? Is there something you'd like to add that we haven't talked about?
What's one question I wish you'd asked? Uh, Probably, Kathryn, how are you doing?
That's an excellent question. So, how are you doing?
Well, I said that because oftentimes, we meet people and we don't ask people, how are you?
That's
Or we
true.
might or we might say, hey, how you doing? But we're not really asking how we're doing.
Mhm.
We're just asking it because that's just the normal flow of a
Right.
conversation.
Mhm.
And I think it's just so important to, again, create space for people to really be able to share, like, how are you doing?
Mhm.
And and so for me in this moment, I'm doing great because I'm talking to you. But I'm having a hard time.
Huh.
I'm in a difficult space, and my brother Greg, he has this thing where he says, you know, life is just lifing, and in the one moment where you might feel like, okay, I'm doing good. I've taken a turn, and
Uh-huh.
then something else comes to like you said, it could be a trigger.
Mhm.
Like you said the other day, you were just kind of, and then all of a sudden, the thoughts of
Mhm.
your mom made you heavy,
Mhm.
or other things can happen in your life to kind of pull you back. And so, it's been definitely a challenge for me in particular. I am a very emotional. I can be a very emotional,
Mhm.
feeling type of person,
Mhm.
which is a great thing, but at the same time, it can be a little, heavy.
Mhm.
And so I'm just doing my best to have moments like this where I can engage, I can have a good time, I can contribute, and then just engage with family and friends and just enjoy life, be do love, as it
Mhm.
says here, and to in the midst of again the grieving and what's going on to be able to have that balance of enjoying life and doing the things I love and what makes me tick, um, and appreciate life.
Mhm. I love that, Catherine. I think that's beautiful. I might have to put that into my script for future podcasts because you're right. We don't really ask how people are doing and really mean it. I love
Hmm.
that. So
Hmm.
thank you so much for being here. I'm sure that you've given a lot of people things to ponder when they face this difficult decision of helping someone leave this world. And I think we can't avoid it. So we should talk about it.
Absolutely, and I appreciate the time. Thank you
Uh,
so much,
Thanks.
Toby, for thinking about me and having me on your what is going to be a wonderful and flourishing
Yes,
podcast.
I hope so. Thank you so much, Catherine.
All
I
right.
loved
Thank you,
having
Toby.
you. Okay.
Take care.
All right. Thanks, Kathryn. Remember, none of us is our worst mistake. We all have so much more to offer the world. And often those so called mistakes are really opportunities to learn and grow. Next week, we'll continue to bring you inspiring stories by people who've identified a need for change and are working to make a difference in the world. Subscribe to our Patreon channel, Fierce Conversations, for special access and behind-the-scenes info. Go to patreon.com/Fierce Conversations or click on the link in the show notes. 10% of the Patreon proceeds are dedicated to providing workbooks to women in prison. The show notes will also provide a link to Kathryn's website so you can get to know her a little better, and a link to purchase my memoir, Living with Conviction. As I talk about in depth in my memoir, I had a conversation in prison where my friend Lisa told me, "In here, we can talk about all the hard things. In fact, I think we must. And so we shall." This is Fierce Conversations with Toby, where we talk about the hard things. Until next time.